You know, when you look at old photos from World War II, especially of the American Army, you see one vehicle popping up over and over again. And it's not always a Sherman tank or a Jeep. It's this weird looking hybrid thing that's part truck, part tank. This right here is the half-track, and it was the forgotten workhorse of the entire war.
I mean, armies were churning these things out by the tens of thousands. They were absolutely critical to the way armored divisions fought. And yet, after the war, they kind of just vanished. So what happened? We're going to dig into what made the half-tracks so vital and then figure out why you won't find a single one in a modern army's arsenal. And right off the bat, if you're picturing some kind of glorified troop truck with tracks slapped on, well, think again. This beast, armed with a 75mm cannon, is also a half-track. And that should give you a pretty big clue as to just how versatile this machine really was. Okay, so to really get why the half-track was even a thing, we've got to go back to the basic problem it was trying to solve on the battlefield. And honestly, it all boils down to one simple thing: speed. Think about it. By the time World War II kicks off, you've got tanks that can really hustle across the countryside. But what about the infantry? The poor guys who have to actually fight alongside them. They're stuck on foot. Sure, you could use trucks on roads, but on the battlefields of Europe, forget it. All that mud, all those shell craters, trucks were totally useless. So you've got this massive disconnect: fast tanks and super slow infantry. And this quote right here, it just nails it. The half-track was never really meant to be a fighting vehicle, not like a tank. Its whole purpose was to be a battle taxi, a tough, all-terrain vehicle that could get soldiers to the fight right up there with the tanks. So here's the thing. The half-track was a compromise for sure, but it was a genius compromise for its time. You see, it had tracks on the back, so it could plow through the mud and rough stuff just like a tank. But at front, it had regular wheels and a steering wheel. That meant any guy who could drive a truck could pretty much jump in and go. It was the perfect, good enough machine to keep the entire army rolling forward together. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, the story doesn't stop there. The basic design of this thing turned out to be so incredibly flexible that the army started using it for just about everything. It became the Swiss Army knife of the US Army. So you need some artillery that can actually keep up with your fast-moving tanks? No problem. Just bolt a 75mm howitzer onto the back. And boom, you've got a self-propelled gun.
Okay, what if you need something with a little more oomph? Well, check out the T-19. They slapped a massive 105mm howitzer on this one. A lot of times, these were stopgaps, right? They were filling in for bigger, purpose-built vehicles, like the M7 Priest, that just weren't rolling off the factory lines fast enough. And then there's this monster. It was nicknamed the Meat Chopper, and you can see why. This is the M16, and it's bristling with four 50-caliber machine guns. This thing became one of the most terrifying anti-aircraft weapons of the entire war. It created this deadly mobile shield for advancing troops. I mean, this just shows you how crazy adaptable this one chassis was. The same basic vehicle could be hauling troops, firing mortars, hunting tanks, or shooting down planes. Whatever the job was, the US Army found a way to make a half-track do it. So, just how common were these things? It's kind of hard to wrap your head around the sheer scale. We're not talking about a handful of special vehicles here. Let's just take the US 2nd and 3rd Armored Divisions as an example. How many half-tracks do you think they had? The number is 604. And get this, that's not total, that was for each division. The Americans were just cranking these things out on an industrial scale that is almost impossible to imagine. But here's the turn. For all its usefulness, the half-track had a really, really dark side. And for the soldiers who actually had to ride into battle in one, well, it was a terrifyingly flawed machine. Yeah, the soldiers, they didn't call it a battle taxi. They had a much grimmer nickname for it: the Purple Heart Box. Named, of course, after the medal you get for being wounded in combat. That name alone tells you everything you need to know about how much they trusted this thing to protect them. So why was it so dangerous? Well, for starters, the armor was paper thin. It could barely stop rifle fire, let alone anything heavier. On top of that, the armor plates were totally flat, which is the worst possible design for deflecting shells. But the real killer? That open top? It left the entire squad of guys in the back completely exposed to artillery and mortar shells bursting in the air above them. It was a death trap. And this wasn't just a design flaw on paper. It had a real, Staggering, almost unbelievable human cost. I want you to just look at this number for a second. 58. Just hold that number in your head.
58. That's how many unwounded men were left in the 47th Armored Infantry Battalion after just 1 week of fighting. 1 week. They started with 750. Think about that. Their battle taxis were so good at getting them to the fight that they just got thrown into the meat grinder over and over and over again, and their rides offered almost no protection when they got there.
And that right there brings us back to the big question. If this thing was so essential, why did it just vanish after the war? Well, the very same flaws that earned it the name Purple Heart Box are exactly why it had to go. You can see the evolution right here. After World War II, both technology and military thinking took a huge leap forward. The whole battle taxi idea grew into what we now call the Armored Personnel Carrier, or APC. And these weren't compromises. Designers started building fully tracked vehicles with thick, angled armor and, crucially, a roof. They weren't just taxis anymore. They were true infantry fighting vehicles, designed to protect the soldiers inside. So really, the half-track story is a textbook case of how technology moves on. It was born out of a very specific need back in the 30s. It served its purpose as a critical, if flawed, compromise during World War II. But by the 1960s, better tech had simply made it obsolete. In the end, the half-track really was the imperfect, indispensable machine. It was the perfect solution to a problem for its time, but that time passed. And it really makes you think, right? What are the good enough technologies that we rely on every single day right now that are just waiting for the next big thing to come along and turn them into museum pieces?